here we have 2 pyruvate which occurred from here, which here we only displayed one, but it happens twice. From here, for pyruvate to enter, it must have oxygen. With oxygen, it enters, and two pyruvate will enter. And the 2 pyruvates will be decarboxylated with 2 CO2 being released. The hydrogens of the pyruvate will react with 2 NAD plus and with 2 NADH. Then the remainder of the pyruvate with coenzyme A and 2 acetyl coenzyme A, which will enter the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle's products will eventually lead to 6 NADH and 2 FADH2, which we will now explain. Alright guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the Krebs cycle. But first of all, we're going to do a review of glycolysis and the link reaction. Glycolysis will always start off with a molecule of glucose or any other sugar, but today we'll just be using glucose. Glucose will break down into fructose 1,6-biphosphate and will break down again due to its instability to DHAP and G3P. DHAP will always become G3P regardless. G3P will become BPG. Due to a series of chemical reactions, it will eventually become PET. From PET, it will become pyruvate. And in this process, we have the release of NADH and ATP. Now, we're at this process here, in which pyruvate will decide to enter the mitochondria. When oxygen is present, it will enter the mitochondria via active transport. After it enters the mitochondria, the pyruvate will be decarboxylated with the release of CO2 being present. Next, the pyruvate molecule will bond with coenzyme A to become acetyl coenzyme A, and in this process, an additional 2 NADH is released. Now we're going to be moving on to the Krebs cycle. The Krebs cycle, otherwise known as the citric acid cycle, will always start off with a molecule of pyruvate. From here, coenzyme A is added, and an NADH molecule is released. Acetyl coenzyme A now decides to enter the Krebs cycle. However, the coenzyme A will leave, and the pyruvate molecule will enter the cycle. Through a series of chemical reactions, it will become citrate, and no product will be released. From citrate to its process of alpha-ketoglutarate, 2 CO2 will be released, as well as 3 NADH. And from alpha-ketoglutarate to succinate, a molecule of ATP will be released. From succinate to oxaloacetate, 1 molecule of ADH2 will be released. However, this does not occur once, but occurs twice, due to 2 pyruvate molecules being present. So now, instead of 2 CO2, it'll be 4 CO2, it'll be 6 NADH, 2 ATP, and 2 FADH2. And that is your Krebs cycle.
Excuse me, sir. What are you doing in here?
I'm your teacher.
No,
I'm your
you're
teacher,
not.
sir.
No, you're
Sir,
not.
I am your teacher.
Can you get out of my classroom? Why don't you get some better
Questions? Excuse me, sir. Why are you recording me?
I'm trying to get the notes.
Give me that.
So, did you have a question?
Yeah.
What was it?
You know that's completely BS right there.
Excuse me?
Yeah, you see PS2 right there? Both hydrogen and oxygen are supposed to come out of there. What are you doing, man?
I don't know.
Dude, the fact that I know this and you don't, are you even the teacher, bro?
Hello everyone. Today we will be talking about the process of photosynthesis and the Calvin cycle demonstrated through Minecraft. First of all, we're going to start off with resetting the day to the beginning of the day to represent what the plant will do when carbon dioxide, light, and water are introduced to a system. So, when the leaves first open, water will enter the plant, as well as CO2 from the surrounding atmosphere with light from the sun. From here, the electrons from the water will be transferred into photosystem 2. This is also known as P680, as it absorbs 680 wavelength light, and it is also known as chlorophyll A as its special pigment. From here, we have the electrons being transported into the primary acceptor, which is this elevator-like structure right here. From here, the minecart was already driven down the electron transport chain with ATP being released here. Now we have the system going to photosystem 1, and now we have the primary structure here as well. From here, we will have the electrons move once more into this process here, where hoppers will act as the NADP reductase. Now, the minecart, which will follow onto the next track in a short moment here, will be transferring this to the Kelvin's, well, we'll be releasing the products. Photosystem 1 is also known as P700 as it absorbs 700 wavelength light and is also known as chlorophyll B. This same stage as photosystem 1, more light is entered and electron replacement occurs. Now, we will head back to the beginning of this cycle, where the products of photosynthesis will be returned to us. And now, while we wait for our products to arrive into this chest here, we will be talking about the Kelvin cycle. The Kelvin cycle occurs when a carbon decides to enter Rubisco. And the first step of the Kelvin cycle is known as carbon fixation, where a 5-carbon sugar now becomes an unstable 6-carbon sugar. This then breaks down into a 3-carbon sugar known as PGA. PGA now reacts and reduces with 2 ATP being reduced. Now, in the step of reduction, the 2 NADPH will be reduced to 2 NADP. Also, from here, every 3 turns of the cycle, 1 G3P, otherwise known as glycerol aldehyde 3-phosphate, will be released. 1 G3P is also known as PGAL, so please keep that in mind. G3P will be used in the process to make glucose. From glucose, 1 ATP is reduced to 1 ADP for the regeneration of RUBP. Now, we will be demonstrating this cycle in which all the products should have arrived. Here we have our electrons, which is no longer purpose for us as only the NADPH moves on to an electron cycle. And we have our ATP here. Now, as we transfer these into this, they'll be moved into the Kelvin cycle. Carbon, which will be introduced as it travels along these hoppers via the system which lies underground, and it'll also be introduced in the elevator shaft over there. Now, as we wait for the products to go here, you can maybe see are the products move up the so-called elevator. Any minute now, and it shall move into the cycle. And also, the Kelvin cycle is light independent, so it can take place at night, as demonstrated here. The Kelvin cycle is also known as the dark reaction because it is light independent. Photosynthesis, however, is light dependent, in which means light is needed for the energy to be manufactured by the thylakoid. However, the Kelvin cycle takes place inside the stroma, so it will take in place in between the space between the thylakoids. Now, as it gets darker, you'll see the reaction continue to move on. Now, as our products have now moved into the Kelvin cycle, in which, after a short period of time, will enter the Kelvin cycle. And over there, as you can see, is a microscope. This is to show the microscopic level of what occurs to the tree to your left. And shortly, our minecart will enter the Calvin cycle, and there we go. Now, as it enters the Calvin cycle, every 3 turns, as I mentioned earlier, will result in 1 G3P being released. Now, if we go look at our products down here in this container, we should be able to see our products after we see 6 rotations. So it has already been 4 rotations of the Calvin cycle. Now it is 5. Now it has been 6. So now we can go check our products. As you can see here, we have 12 NADP, 18 ADP being converted, and 2 G3P. These products occur due to 3 NADPH being used for every turn of the cycle, therefore 6 turns of the cycle result in 18 NADP being released. ADP is 18 ADP is used due to 3 ATP being used. And I am very sorry, I meant to say that 2 NADPH is used per cycle of the Calvin cycle. And 2 G3P occurs in the 2 of the cycles of the Calvin cycle. Thank you for tuning in to Biology from Minecraft.